The dust particles danced in the afternoon sunlight streaming through the small attic window as Sarah climbed the creaking wooden stairs for what she thought would be the last time. Her grandmother's house had been empty for 3 months since the funeral, and the family had finally decided it was time to sort through decades of accumulated memories before putting the property on the market. Sarah had volunteered for the attic duty, expecting to find nothing more than old Christmas decorations and moth-eaten clothing. What she discovered instead would shatter everything she believed about her family and force her to question the very foundation of her identity. Hidden beneath layers of forgotten belongings was a truth so disturbing that 3 generations had conspired to keep it buried. This is a story of how one afternoon changed not just Sarah's understanding of her past, but revealed a family secret so dangerous that children had been systematically hidden, identities erased, and lives completely reconstructed to protect a forbidden truth that could destroy them all. Sarah had been working in her grandmother's attic for nearly 4 hours when she noticed something odd about the floorboards in the far corner. Unlike the rest of the weathered wood, one section appeared newer, as if it had been recently replaced. Her curiosity piqued. She pried up the loose boards with a screwdriver she'd found in her grandfather's old toolbox. Beneath the floorboards was a metal box, approximately the size of a shoebox, wrapped in several layers of plastic. The weight of it surprised her as she lifted it out. The lock was old but sturdy, and after several attempts with various tools, she managed to break it open. What she found inside defied all logic and reason. The box contained dozens of birth certificates, all bearing her family's surname, but with names she had never heard before. Michael Thompson, born 1987. Rebecca Thompson, born 1991. David Thompson, born 1995. The dates spanned over 30 years, and none of these names belonged to anyone she knew in her family. But it wasn't just the birth certificates that disturbed her. There were photographs, old Polaroid that showed children of various ages standing in locations she recognized immediately. Her grandmother's backyard, the front porch of this very house, the old oak tree where she herself had played as a child. These children looked happy, well cared for, but she had never seen them before in her life. At the bottom of the box, wrapped in tissue paper that had yellowed with age, was a leather-bound journal. The handwriting on the first page was unmistakably her grandmother's elegant script. Protection Protocol Generation 3. May God forgive us for what we must do. Sarah's hands trembled as she read the first entry, dated 28 years ago. Another child born with a mark. Elizabeth cannot know. The arrangements have been made. By morning, little Michael will be with the Hendersons in Oregon. They will love him as their own, and he will be safe from the truth that would destroy him. The afternoon sun was fading, casting long shadows across the attic floor, but Sarah couldn't stop reading. Entry after entry detailed the systematic removal of children from her family, each one relocated for their own protection. The journal spoke of signs to watch for, characteristics that would identify which children needed to be hidden, and an elaborate network of distant relatives and trusted friends who would take these children and raise them as their own. As she closed the journal, Sarah realized with growing horror that she might not be the only child in her family. She might not even be Sarah Thompson. The life she had lived, the identity she had built, everything she thought she knew about herself could be a carefully constructed lie designed to protect her from something her family considered more dangerous than losing their children forever. The drive to her mother's house felt longer than usual. Sarah clutched the metal box in her lap, the evidence burning against her hands like a guilty secret. She had rehearsed what she would say a dozen times, but each version sounded more absurd than the last. How do you ask your mother if your entire life has been a lie? Margaret Thompson was in her garden when Sarah arrived, tending to the roses that had been her pride and joy for decades. At 72, she remained a formidable woman, sharp-eyed and strong-willed. But when she saw the box in Sarah's hands, something changed in her expression. The color drained from her face, and her gardening shears fell from her suddenly trembling fingers. "Where did you find that?" Margaret's voice was barely a whisper. "In grandmother's attic. Mom, I need you to tell me the truth." Whose birth certificates are these? Who are these children in the photographs? Margaret sank onto her garden bench, suddenly looking every one of her 72 years. I prayed this day would never come. Your grandmother swore she had destroyed everything. Mom, please, I need to understand. Are these my brothers and sisters? Do I have family I don't know about? The silence stretched between them like a chasm. When Margaret finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of decades of carefully guarded secrets. Your grandmother called it the family curse, but it wasn't really a curse. It was our heritage, our bloodline. Every few years, a child will be born with certain characteristics, physical traits that link them to something in our past, something dangerous. What kind of characteristics? What was so dangerous that you had to give away your own children? Margaret stood up and walked to the old oak tree in her backyard, the same tree that appeared in the photographs from the box. Your great-great-grandfather was involved in something during the war, something that certain people never forgot, never forgave. When children were born who looked too much like him, who carried his unmistakable features, your grandmother made the impossible choice to protect them. Sarah felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. How many children were taken away? 12, over the course of 30 years. 12 children who might have been targets if the wrong people recognized them. Your grandmother developed what she called the protection protocol. She had connections, people who owed favors, distant relatives in other states. Each child was placed with loving families who knew never to speak of their origins. And me? Am I really your daughter, or was I one of the relocated children too? Margaret turned to face her, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. You are my daughter, but you weren't supposed to be the one to stay. When you were born, you had all the characteristics. The distinctive jawline, the unusual eye color, the birthmark on your shoulder that matches the one in your great-great-grandfather's military photographs. Your grandmother had already made arrangements to send you away. Then why am I here? What changed? I fought her. For the first and only time in my life, I defied my mother. I couldn't bear to lose another child. I told her I would take you and disappear rather than let her take you from me. We compromised. You would stay, but we would change your appearance as much as possible. The hair coloring you've had since childhood, the colored contact lenses, even the small cosmetic surgery when you were 16 that we told you was for a deviated septum. What do you think about what Sarah has discovered so far? Can you imagine finding out that your entire physical appearance has been altered to hide your true identity? What would you do in her situation? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The next morning, Sarah sat in the local library, surrounded by historical records, genealogy websites, and old newspaper archives. Armed with her great-great-grandfather's real name from her grandmother's journal, she began piecing together the family history that had been hidden from her for 28 years. What she discovered was more complex and troubling than she had imagined. Her great-great-grandfather, Heinrich Müller, had immigrated to America in 1947, 2 years after the end of World War II. But according to the immigration record she found, he hadn't been a refugee fleeing the devastation of Europe. He had been something much more controversial. Hidden in the basement archives of the local historical society, she found a collection of documents that had been donated by a Holocaust survivor decades earlier. Among them was a photograph that made her blood run cold. Heinrich Müller, unmistakably recognizable despite the Nazi uniform he wore, stood among a group of officers outside what the caption identified as a concentration camp in Poland. The distinctive jawline, the unusual pale green eyes, the small scar above the left eyebrow that Sarah had inherited and always been told was from a childhood accident. All of it was clearly visible in the photograph of a man who had participated in one of history's darkest chapters. But the story didn't end there. As Sarah dug deeper, she discovered that Heinrich Müller had been more than just a soldier following orders. Documents suggested he had been involved in medical experiments, in the systematic identification and persecution of specific genetic lineages. Ironically, The very traits he had helped identify in others had become the family curse that now haunted his descendants. The newspaper archives told the rest of the story. Throughout the 1960s and 70s, Nazi hunters had been tracking down war criminals who had escaped to America. Several had been found living in their quiet suburban community. Heinrich Müller had died in 1963, but not before word had spread through certain circles about his past and his distinctive physical characteristics. Sarah's grandmother's journal had been right about the danger. There were people, survivors and their descendants, who still watched and remembered. Children who bore Heinrich's unmistakable features could indeed become targets of a justice that law enforcement couldn't always provide or protect against. A conversation with Mrs. Goldstein, now 93 and one of the few remaining Holocaust survivors in her town, confirmed Sarah's worst fears. "We knew about the Müller family," the elderly woman told her, her voice still strong despite her advanced age. "My husband, may he rest in peace, he recognized Heinrich at the grocery store in 1961. We debated what to do, whether to report him to the authorities or handle it ourselves." "What stopped you?" "We realized he had a family, children who had nothing to do with his crimes. But we also made sure the community knew who he was and what he had done. Perhaps we were wrong to let the children pay for their father's sins, but the pain, the memories, they don't just disappear because time passes." Sarah left the library with a crushing understanding of why her family had made such extreme sacrifices. They hadn't been protecting a simple family secret or hiding from embarrassment. They had been protecting innocent children from becoming targets of a generational hatred that their great-great-grandfather had earned through unforgivable acts. Thank you so much for staying with this story until this point. We truly appreciate your time and engagement with this difficult but important tale. We assure you that the most impactful revelations are still to come, and what you'll discover in the remaining chapters will completely transform how you view family loyalty and the price of protecting the ones we love. Armed with the address she had found in her grandmother's journal, Sarah drove 8 hours to Portland, Oregon, to find Michael Thompson, or rather Michael Henderson, as he had been known for the past 35 years. The man who answered the door at the modest suburban home looked exactly like she had always imagined an older brother would look. At 35, Michael had the same distinctive jawline, the same pale green eyes that Sarah had hidden behind colored contacts her entire life. But unlike her, he seemed at peace with himself, confident and unafraid. When she explained who she was and why she had come, his reaction was not what she expected. "I've been waiting for this day for 20 years, he said, inviting her into his living room where family photographs showed him with a wife and 2 young children. "I've known about my origins since I turned 18. The Hendersons told me everything. You knew, and you never tried to find us." Michael poured 2 cups of coffee and settled into his chair across from her. "I did find you. I found all of them. There are 12 of us. Sarah, 12 children who were given new lives, new identities, new families. I've been in contact with most of them for years." "How is that possible?" "Grandmother's journal made it sound like you all just disappear forever. Your grandmother was protecting you, the ones who stayed behind. She couldn't risk any contact that might lead back to you, but she also couldn't completely abandon us. Every year, she would send updates through intermediaries. She knew when we graduated, when we got married, when we had children. She even set up trust funds for all of us." Michael opened a laptop and showed Sarah a private social media group with 11 other members. Photographs showed successful adults living normal, happy lives across the country. Doctors, teachers, business owners, parents, all carrying on their lives under assumed identities, but connected by their shared origin and the sacrifice their grandmother had made. "Here's what your grandmother never told your mother," Michael continued. "The threat wasn't just theoretical. In 1989, a family in Michigan with similar characteristics was targeted. Their house was firebombed. 2 children died. Your grandmother's contacts in the survivor community warned her that the attacks were going to continue. So you all know? You know what Heinrich did. We know and we live with it. But we also know that we had nothing to do with his crimes. We were children, innocent of everything except carrying his genes. Your grandmother gave us a chance to live without that shadow hanging over us every day. Michael showed her photographs of his own children. Two beautiful kids who showed no trace of the distinctive features that had marked them for hiding. It ended with us, Sarah. None of our children carry the strong genetic markers. In another generation, maybe two, the physical traits that made us targets will be diluted enough that they won't be recognizable. But what about me? What about the others who stay behind? Your mother fought to keep you, and your grandmother finally agreed because you were the last. After you, the family made the conscious decision to end the bloodline. Your mother never had more children, and your aunt chose not to have children at all. You're the last generation to carry the full genetic inheritance. The weight of this revelation settled on Sarah like a physical burden. She was not just a keeper of family secrets. She was a final chapter in a story that had begun with unspeakable evil and had cost her family 12 children over 3 decades. What am I supposed to do with this information? Do I tell my mother I found you? Do I reconnect you with the family? Michael looked thoughtful. That's your choice, Sarah. But remember, your grandmother's plan worked. We're all alive, all happy, all safe. Sometimes the greatest act of love is letting go completely. Sarah returned home carrying the burden of knowledge that would change everything or nothing, depending on the choice she made. She now understood that her family had not been torn apart by cruelty or indifference, but by a desperate love that demanded impossible sacrifices. Her mother was waiting in the garden when she arrived, the same spot where their confrontation had begun just a week earlier. Margaret's face was etched with worry and sleepless nights. "Did you find him?" "I found them all, Mom. All 12 of them." Sarah told her mother about Michael, about the network of relocated siblings, about their successful lives and loving families. She saw hope flicker in Margaret's eyes for the first time in years, the possibility of reconnection with the children who had been lost. But then Sarah shared the rest of Michael's message, that their grandmother's sacrifice had worked, that the family was safer with the separation maintained, that sometimes love meant permanent distance. He also told me about the Michigan family, Mom, about what happened when people with our characteristics were found. Grandmother wasn't just being paranoid, was she? Margaret shook her head slowly. 2 children died, Sarah. 7-year-old twins who looked just like you did at that age. After that, your grandmother became absolutely ruthless about the protocol. She said she would rather lose her grandchildren to loving families than lose them to hatred and violence. There's something else, Mom. Michael told me that I'm the last. That after me, the physical traits won't be strong enough to be recognizable. This all ends with me. The 2 women sat in silence as the sun set behind the old oak tree, the same tree that had witnessed 3 generations of family secrets and sacrifices. Sarah understood now why her grandmother had been so adamant about maintaining the separation. Contact meant risk, and risk meant potential death for innocent children who bore no responsibility for their ancestors' crimes. "What are you going to do?" Margaret asked finally. Sarah reached into her purse and pulled out 2 items, her grandmother's journal and a new leather-bound notebook she had purchased that morning. "I'm going to make a choice that grandmother never had to make. I'm going to write down everything. The truth, the whole truth, with all the documents and evidence. But I'm not going to reveal it until the last person who could be hurt by it is gone." "You mean?" I'm going to wait until all the relocated children have lived full lives, until their children are grown and safe, until survivor generation has passed away and the anger has finally died down. Maybe in 50 years, maybe longer, but someday when it's truly safe, this story deserves to be told. Sarah opened a new journal and began to write. This is the true story of the Thompson family, written in 2023 by the last generation to carry the burden of Heinrich Müller's legacy. We were not victims of our ancestors' crimes, but we became the guardians of a secret that saved 12 innocent lives. And what about your own life, Sarah? What about your future, your children? Sarah looked up from her writing and smiled for the first time in a week. I'm going to stop hiding, Mom. I'm going to take out the colored contacts, grow out my natural hair color, and live as myself for the first time in 28 years. If there's still danger, I'll face it, but I won't pass this fear on to another generation. And Michael, the others, I'll write to them. I'll tell them they can contact you if they want to, but that there's no pressure, no expectation. Some secrets are meant to be kept, and some families are meant to be separated. But some wounds can only heal when they're finally exposed to light. As Sarah wrote the first chapter of her grandmother's true story, she realized that sometimes the greatest acts of love look like betrayal, abandonment, and cruelty to those who don't understand the whole picture. Her grandmother had been willing to be seen as the villain of the family story in order to be the hero of 12 children's survival stories. Now it was Sarah's turn to decide what kind of story she would write with the rest of her life. What would you do if you discovered that everything you believed about your family was designed to protect you from a truth that could destroy you? Would you choose the safety of continued secrecy, or would you risk everything to live authentically, knowing that some truths come at a price that extends far beyond your own life? This story forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about inherited guilt, the price of survival, and the different forms that love can take. Sometimes protecting someone means pushing them away. Sometimes the greatest sacrifice is being willing to be misunderstood forever. We want to hear your thoughts on this complex family dynamic. Have you ever discovered family secrets that changed your understanding of your own identity? How do you think Sarah should move forward with this knowledge? Share your perspective in the comments below. Your insights might help others who are grappling with difficult family truths. If this story moved you and made you think about the complexities of family loyalty and survival, please subscribe to our channel for more real stories that explore the difficult choices people make for love. Your support helps us continue sharing these important human experiences. And don't miss our next video. She found her twin sister's diary 20 years after her death. What she read changed everything she knew about her own life. It's a discovery that will challenge everything you think you know about sibling bonds and the secrets we keep even from those closest to us. Click to watch now.